Future in-laws tried to steal my keys and break into my lake house to use it for a getaway weekend. After being told no and acting like they were doing a favor for me, I inherited my grandparents' house, which is on a lake in a small, slightly tourist town where I owned a pretty tourist business. I had to close my business in March because of the virus, and I don't think I will ever be able to reopen. Prior to that, my fiancé had been looking for work near me so he could move to my place, but with his job being more stable, I ended up moving to him. We haven't yet decided whether to sell my house or use it as an income property via Airbnb or similar. The house is not set up as an Airbnb right now. It is very much still my house. Most of my belongings are still there, its walls are covered in pictures of my family, it's in a very tourist neighborhood, and most houses on the street are second homes for people, but not for me. Last Wednesday, my Emil showed up while I was not home and told we're going to have a getaway with friends at the lake house this weekend. So we just came to get the keys. Future father-in-law and 2 other couples were already waiting outside in an SUV packed up and ready for the weekend, was confused and asked if they talked to me, and his mom misleadingly said we'd been texting about it. We had been texting about the house, but she never asked to use it. She had just texted me asking if I had sold it yet, and I said no fiancé is smart and decided to call me before doing anything. But I was at the dentist and couldn't answer for half an hour. During that time, his mom got upset that he wouldn't give her my keys and then started spewing out ridiculousness. She told him we should be grateful that we have someone willing to go sit there for the weekend and make sure everything is okay at the house, and then that we should be grateful for an opportunity to have a practice run for it as a vacation rental that they were willing to try for free, and that if your first visit is paying customers and it doesn't go well, then you have to pay them. But they're willing to do this for us for free, basically acting like it's a favor they're doing me by deciding that they're going to live in my house for 4 days with 4 other strangers since couldn't reach me, and he was sure I wouldn't have agreed to this without telling him. He wouldn't give up the keys, and she got upset saying they've already promised their friends a vacation. He told them they would have to pay for hotel rooms then, which apparently pissed her off more, and they left. Now, several weeks prior to all this, she had been asking questions about the house, like, aren't I worried about it being unattended? I said my neighbor has a key and watches it for me. Well, they went to the house and went to the neighbors' houses and tried to con them out of a key. She introduced herself to the neighbor and told them my key was packed up in boxes and I had told her to stop at the neighbors, laughed about how she didn't think to ask which side the neighbor was on. She went first to the wrong house, which had weekend renters in it, and then she went to the other side where she found the guy who does indeed have the key. Thank God, he was smart and knew it was unlike me to have this happen. He told her he had to go look for the key, locked the door, and called the police. He said she banged on his door a bunch after a while, and the police took forever to show up. When they did show up, they found her and future father-in-law trying to break into my house using a first-floor window. They were very nearly arrested but got out of it. Well, late last night they got home, and Neil posted a long rant on Facebook and made it as misleading as possible. She said they were willing to do me a huge favor in return for a weekend at my lake house, and they held up their end of the bargain, but at the last minute I ruined their vacation and wouldn't give them keys when they and their friends were already packed and in the car. She made it sound like we had a deal agreed upon ahead of time, and all this stuff. Now it has 40 comments from all her friends saying I sound like a brat. They can't believe fiancé would date someone so selfish. It makes me want to rip my hair out. I shouldn't care what people think, and yet it makes me want to scream knowing all these people think I'm brat when they literally tried to break into my house after being told no. Never seen this side of them. But the thing that scares me is that isn't surprised. He's angry and upset and yelled at them on the phone multiple times and has told them they are not welcome at either of our homes, but he's not surprised. So this type of behavior isn't a surprise coming from these people. Today I'm installing better locks and security cameras. The days following the incident were difficult. I couldn't get out of my head how far my fiancé's parents had gone beyond all possible limits. The Facebook posts kept getting worse. Every hour, it seemed like someone added a new comment judging my character, many even accusing me of not being a good partner to my fiancé. All of this because, according to my future mother-in-law's version, I had betrayed a non-existent agreement. My fiancé, however, was not willing to let this slide. After cutting off contact with them, he tried once more to talk to them and make it clear how much this situation had hurt us. What he didn't expect was his mother's enraged reaction. She basically told him he should choose between her and that selfish woman who doesn't know how to share. They were putting pressure on him, trying to make him choose family over me. That was when it all clicked. The problem wasn't just a dispute over the house, it was about control. They thought they could dictate our lives, and when something didn't go their way, they got angry. My fiancé came home looking exhausted and defeated. He collapsed onto the couch, his eyes red, and for the first time, I saw him without hope regarding his parents. He simply said, "They will never change." I'm so sorry. That ignited something in me. It wasn't fair that they would destroy everything and walk away unscathed. And I knew exactly how to show them they couldn't play with our lives and get away with it. First, I hired a lawyer. If they were willing to break into my house, I was willing to take legal action against them. The lawyer suggested a restraining order, and although it seemed extreme, I felt it was necessary given their irrational behavior. I also started looking for high-end security cameras. I installed them all around the house and put up visible warning stickers about the surveillance. I wanted them to know that if they tried anything again, they would be watched. The lawyer sent them a formal notice regarding trespassing. That clearly infuriated them, as my future mother-in-law went back to posting on Facebook, this time directly attacking my fiancé. She said she never imagined a son of hers would act in such a cruel way, putting love for an old house-above family. The post was long and full of passive-aggressive comments, clearly to incite sympathy from friends. When my fiancé saw it, he decided to respond. He wrote, "To everyone blindly believing my mother's story, I want you to know there was no favor offered or any agreement made. They tried to break into my fiancé's house without permission. This was a violation of trust and boundaries. I am devastated to have to handle it this way. But if my mother keeps publicly defaming my fiancé and painting me as a villain, I have no choice but to tell the truth." The responses came like a swarm. Some people supported my fiancé, saying they always considered him a fair person. But others, mostly longtime friends of his parents, began attacking even more. It was painful to see how many people were willing to ignore the fact that they had literally tried to break into a house. Then, my lawyer obtained another interesting piece of information. When the police arrived at my house, they were trying to enter through the front window. In the process, they broke part of the window frame and damaged a screen. It was a small damage, but enough to be documented and used in the case. I knew this was my chance to show everyone they weren't victims. I hired an appraiser to assess the damage and gave them an estimate for repairs, and I sent the bill directly to my future in-laws, along with a notice that if they didn't pay, I would move forward with a lawsuit. I also had a surprise for my future mother-in-law. Thanks to the newly installed security cameras, I could prove they had returned to my house once again while I was away. This time, they didn't manage to get in, but they clearly tried to open the back door and peek through the windows. I showed the footage to my lawyer, and he said we now had solid proof to justify a restraining order. After that, things got uglier than I could have imagined. My fiancé received a message from his father. "If you think we're going to be treated like criminals, then don't ever count on us again." I saw my fiancé close his eyes, a mix of sadness and anger taking over him. They were basically emotionally blackmailing us to make us drop it. But I knew we couldn't back down, not after everything they had done. Finally, the day of the restraining order hearing arrived. My future in-laws were there, looking smug, as if they believed all of this was a big injustice. They argued that they were just trying to help the family, but the evidence was clear. They had no permission, they trespassed, caused damage, and even tried to enter again. The judge wasn't lenient. They were given a 1-year restraining order, meaning they couldn't come near me or my house without facing severe legal consequences. I could see the color drain from my future mother-in-law's face as the judge read the decision. She finally understood that her actions had real consequences. After the hearing, I received messages from their friends and acquaintances saying that I had destroyed a family and that I was a horrible person. But, interestingly, some people also started to distance themselves from them. Apparently, their absurd behavior made some friends realize just how toxic they were. Over time, my fiancé's relationship with his parents remained strained. He was dealing with the pain of seeing his parents being so selfish and manipulative. It was a painful lesson for him, but at the same time, he understood that our safety and respect as a couple were more important than his parents' pride. In the end, we decided not to sell my house. Instead, I began renovating it. Each room we renovated, each new decoration, represented a new beginning. It wouldn't just be an inherited house anymore. It would be our home, a safe place, away from the manipulations and invasions of those who thought they could control our lives. And as for my future in-laws, they continue trying to manipulate the narrative. But now, every time they try, they find locked doors and cameras watching them. They no longer have access to our lives and, finally, no longer have the power to control us. After the hearing, I thought I would finally have some peace. The new locks and security cameras gave me a sense of protection, and the restraining order seemed to have set a clear boundary. However, I soon realized I had underestimated the persistence and level of selfishness of my fiancé's parents. A few weeks after the hearing, I was having a quiet day at home, organizing documents and thinking about the next steps for renovating the lake house. That's when I received an alert on my phone. The security camera installed at the lake house had detected movement. My heart started racing, and I opened the app to see the live video. The scene unfolding in front of me was surreal. My future in-laws, along with a man I didn't recognize, were at the front of my house, clearly trying to open the door. It wasn't possible to see many details of their faces, but it was easy to recognize them by their clothes and the way they moved. They were determined to get in, and I realized the unknown man seemed to be a locksmith or someone who knew what he was doing, as he had tools in his hand and was trying to dismantle the lock I had recently installed. With trembling hands, I immediately called my fiancé. He answered, and I explained, trying to stay calm. "They're there. Your parents. They're trying to get into the house." He was silent for a second, then simply said, "I'm coming to meet you, and we'll handle this together. But call the police now." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Without wasting another second, I called the police. I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained that there were people violating a restraining order and attempting to break into my house, providing the address and detailing that there was a restraining order in place against these individuals. The dispatcher assured me they would send a patrol immediately and asked me to stay on the line. While I waited, I kept watching the camera feed. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed to echo. My future in-laws were becoming more aggressive. The man with them was clearly getting frustrated, while my future mother-in-law gestured angrily, pointing at the door as if demanding he get the job done quickly. They didn't seem to understand that everything was being recorded. Every word of frustration, every attempt to force their way in. Finally, I saw the police car arrive. 2 patrols parked, and the officers got out quickly. My future in-laws seemed surprised and began gesturing, trying to justify their actions. But I had already informed the police about the restraining order, and they were not interested in hearing excuses. One of the officers immediately asked them to raise their hands. I could see from the camera that my future mother-in-law was trying to argue, pointing at the house as if to say they had the right to be there, but the officers were unmoved. As the officers approached, it became evident that my future in-laws were in a complicated situation. The nearest officer took the restraining order document from one of his colleagues and showed it to them. My future mother-in-law went pale. I could see from the video that she tried to say something, perhaps one last attempt to justify herself, but the officers began handcuffing them. At that moment, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I didn't want the situation to come to this, but they gave me no choice. They crossed every possible line, ignored every warning, and thought they could do whatever they wanted. Watching that scene was like finally seeing justice being done, although it was bitter knowing my fiancé was losing his parents because of their irrational behavior. A few minutes later, my fiancé arrived at my house. He was serious, his eyes filled with worry. I showed him the video, and he watched in silence, his expression shifting from anger to deep sadness. "They really have no boundaries," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I can't believe they did this, that they went this far." When the police contacted me to confirm the details of what had happened, they assured me they were taking the trespassing very seriously, especially given the restraining order violation. It became clear that my future in-laws had not only broken the law but also shown a complete lack of respect for the legal measures that were in place. The next day, I received a call from their lawyer. He tried, very politely, to suggest that maybe I could drop the charges if they formally apologized. I could barely hold back my laughter. After everything they did, all the manipulation, lies, trespassing, and attempts at intimidation, now they wanted an amicable settlement? The answer was simple: no. A few days later, my fiancé and I were called in to give our formal statements. Throughout the process, he remained by my side, though I could see the weight of the situation on his shoulders. It was painful for him to testify against his own parents, but he knew there was no other choice. They had crossed every line, and now they had to face the consequences. The trial happened a few weeks later. It was a swift hearing where the evidence, including the security camera footage and the history of the prior break-in attempt, was presented. The judge had no difficulty seeing the gravity of their behavior. They were found guilty of violating the restraining order, attempted trespassing, and property damage. They received a prison sentence, though it wasn't long. It was enough to leave them with a criminal record and, hopefully, to make them understand that their actions had real consequences. After the trial, their silence was deafening. There were no more Facebook posts, no attempts at contact, no indirect messages sent through friends. It was as if they finally understood that I wasn't playing games and that their manipulation and abuse would no longer be tolerated. My fiancé and I moved on, with a sense of relief that we had finally set a clear boundary. The lake house continued to be our refuge, and each improvement we made to it became a symbol of our new beginning, a place where no toxic behavior or manipulation had a place. Now, with the new cameras, reinforced locks, and the certainty that we had done the right thing, we could finally breathe in peace. We learned, in the hardest way possible, that no matter how close someone is, nobody has the right to cross our boundaries and make us feel unsafe in our own home.